What happens when a diner waitress is fired for feeding a weary veteran? The unexpected arrival of 4 Marines turns a small-town scandal into a moment no one will forget. I've always believed a diner is more than a place to eat. It's a heartbeat, a pulse of the town, where folks come to share their stories over coffee and biscuits. For nearly 10 years, I've been part of that heartbeat at Daisy's Diner on Juniper Hollow Road in Crestwood, New Mexico. The checkered floor, the red vinyl booths, the jukebox humming Johnny Cash in the corner. It's home, or as close to it as I've got since my husband passed. I'm Loretta Mae Hensley, and at 58, I've learned to carry myself with a smile, even when the world feels heavy. But that morning, the weight of it all nearly broke me. It was just past 7, the sun spilling through the diner's big windows, painting the counter in gold. The air smelled of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee, and the breakfast rush was in full swing. I moved through the chaos with ease, balancing plates of pancakes and eggs, refilling mugs for the regulars, folks like Hank Dorsey, a trucker who always tipped in quarters, or the young couple, Tessa and Jonah, sharing a booth and a milkshake. I've got a knack for remembering orders without a notepad, a trick I picked up years ago when I started waitressing to keep my kids fed. But it's not the orders that matter. It's the people. The way their eyes light up when you slip them an extra slice of pie or ask about their day. That's what keeps me going. That morning, I noticed him in the corner booth, tucked away like he didn't want to be seen. An older man, maybe in his late 70s, with a face carved by time, deep lines around his eyes, gray hair cropped short like he'd never left the service. He wore a faded denim jacket, patched at the elbows, and a worn canvas backpack sat at his feet. His hands, weathered and trembling just a touch, were folded on the table, and he stared out the window like he was looking for something long gone. He'd asked for a glass of water, nothing else, and I brought it to him with a smile, figuring he'd order when he was ready. The rush slowed around 8, giving me a moment to breathe. I wiped my hands on my apron, still spotless because I take pride in that, and headed to his table. "Morning, sir," I said, keeping my voice warm. "You look like you could use something hearty. We've got a special today, biscuits and gravy with a side of hash browns. Sound good?" He turned from the window, his pale blue eyes meeting mine. There was a weight in them, like he'd carried more than his share of burdens. "That sounds fine, ma'am," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel under boots. "But I don't have much cash. Just enough for coffee, maybe." I tilted my head, taking him in. I've seen plenty of folks down on their luck, truckers who lost a job, travelers passing through with empty wallets. Something about this man hit me hard. Maybe it was the way his hands shook, or the quiet pride in his voice, like he'd rather starve than admit he needed help. I've been there, scraping by after my husband died, counting pennies for groceries. "Tell you what," I said, lowering my voice so the other customers wouldn't hear. "The kitchen's got some extra biscuits today. I'll bring you a plate, no charge. Nobody leaves Daisy's hungry." His eyes widened, and he shook his head, firm but polite. "I don't take charity, ma'am. I can pay my way." "It's not charity," I said, matching his tone. "It's just how we do things here. You sit tight." I turned before he could argue, my heart doing that funny little flip it does when you know you're doing right, even if it's risky. In the kitchen, I plated a generous helping of biscuits, smothered in creamy sausage gravy, the kind that sticks to your ribs. I added a pile of crispy hash browns and a strip of bacon, just because. I glanced over my shoulder to make sure no one was watching. Darlene Faye Whitaker, my boss, had a nose for anything that cut into her profits. She's a wiry woman in her 40s, all sharp edges and sharper words, with a blonde ponytail that swings like a metronome when she's mad. Her rule was clear: no free food, no exceptions. But I figured what she didn't know wouldn't hurt her. I'd cover the cost from my tips if it came to that. Back at his table, I set the plate down gently, the steam rising in soft curls. "Here you go," I said. "On the house. Enjoy." He stared at the food, his face unreadable, like he was wrestling with something deep inside. For a moment, I thought he'd push it away, pride winning out. But then he nodded, a faint smile breaking through, like sunlight through a storm cloud. "Thank you, ma'am," he said. "That's mighty kind of you." I smiled back, feeling that warmth you get when you know you've made a difference, even a small one. "You're welcome," I said, and went back to my duties, refilling coffee, clearing plates, trading small talk with Hank about his latest haul to Albuquerque. The diner settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind that feels like a deep breath after a long morning. Tessa and Jonah were laughing over their milkshake, and Hank was scrolling through his phone, muttering about gas prices. Everything felt right, until Darlene burst through the kitchen doors like a thunderclap, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk hunting prey. I was wiping down the counter when she zeroed in on me, her heels clicking sharp on the checkered floor. "Loretta," she snapped, her voice cutting through the diner's hum. "What's that old man eating over there?" I froze, my rag still in hand, my heart sinking like a stone. I'd hoped she wouldn't notice, but Darlene's got eyes like a vulture. "Just some biscuits and gravy," I said, keeping my tone even, like I was talking about the weather. He looked hungry. Darlene's eyes narrowed to slits, her lips a thin line. "Did he pay for it?" I hesitated, just a heartbeat, then squared my shoulders. I wasn't ashamed of what I'd done. "I covered it, Darlene. It's no big deal." "No big deal?" Her voice shot up, loud enough to make Tessa and Jonah look up from their milkshake. "You're giving away my food now? You think this place runs on your bleeding heart, Loretta?" The diner went quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. Hank set his phone down, his jaw tight. The couple stared, wide-eyed. I felt my cheeks burn, but I held Darlene's gaze. "He's an old man, Darlene," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "Probably a veteran by the look of him. I wasn't about to let him walk out hungry." Darlene stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, sharp and expensive. "I don't care if he's the damn president," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "You don't give away food without my say-so. You're not the owner here. I am." I felt the eyes of the diner on me, each one a little stab of humiliation. I've taken plenty in my life, grief, hard times, long shifts on aching feet. But this was different. This was public, personal, meant to cut. I glanced at the old man in the corner. He'd stopped eating, his fork hovering over his plate, his eyes fixed on us. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, but Darlene wasn't done. "Go tell him he's got to pay up," she said, pointing at his table, "or I'm calling the cops." The words hit like a slap. Call the cops? Over a plate of biscuits? I took a deep breath, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from a slow-burning anger. "Darlene, please," I said, keeping my voice low, trying to keep this between us. "He doesn't have the money. Let me cover it out of my tips." She crossed her arms, her face a mask of contempt. "You're not listening, Loretta. You don't get to make those calls. Get the money, or you're done here." The air seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of her words. Done here? After 10 years of pouring my heart into this place, of knowing every regular by name, of scrubbing counters until my hands cracked? I felt the room tilt, but I held my ground. "You're firing me?" I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "For feeding a hungry man?" "I'm firing you for stealing!" Darlene snapped, loud enough for the whole diner to hear us. "Food's not free, and neither's your job. Get your things and get out." The silence was deafening. Hank's coffee mug sat untouched, his eyes burning holes into Darlene. Tessa and Jonah exchanged uneasy glances, their milkshake forgotten. The old man pushed his plate away, his hands steady now, his face unreadable. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I'd be damned if I let Darlene see me cry. I untied my apron, folding it with care, like it was something precious. Maybe it was. 10 years of my life, folded into that faded cloth. "I'll go," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But you're wrong about this, Darlene. You're dead wrong." As I turned to leave, the old man stood, slow but deliberate, his chair scraping against the floor. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying across the diner, low and firm. "You don't need to do this on my account." I paused, meeting his gaze. Those pale blue eyes held something fierce, something that reminded me of my father, a man who'd fought in Vietnam and never let the world break him. "It's not just about you," I said softly. "It's about what's right." Darlene rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with scorn. "Save the speech, Loretta. And you," she jabbed a finger at the old man, "either pay for that food or get out before I have you thrown out." He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his backpack, pulling out a crumpled $10 bill. He placed it on the table, his hand steady now, like he was laying down a challenge. "That's all I got," he said. "Take it or leave it." Darlene snatched the bill, muttering something I couldn't hear, but could guess wasn't kind. "Not enough, but it's a start," she said. "Now get out." I watched him sling his backpack over his shoulder, his movement slow but purposeful. He didn't look back as he headed for the door, and I followed, ignoring Darlene's glare. Outside, the morning air was crisp, the street quiet except for the hum of a passing car. He stopped on the sidewalk, turning to face me. "I'm sorry you lost your job over me," he said, his voice heavy with something like guilt. "Didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," I said, my voice firm. "She did, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." He studied me for a moment, then nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. "You're a good woman, Miss Hensley. Don't let folks like her make you think otherwise." I managed a small smile, though my chest ached. "You take care, all right? And if you're ever hungry, you know where to find me." He nodded again, then turned and walked down Juniper Hollow Road, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared around the bend. I stood there, alone, the diner's neon sign buzzing behind me. I'd lost my job, my livelihood, all for a moment of kindness. But as I looked down the empty street, I felt a flicker of something. Maybe hope, maybe defiance. This wasn't the end. Not for me, and not for him. You won't believe who stood up for me next. This is just the beginning. It gets a lot tougher from here. I sat on that splintered bench outside Daisy's diner, my purse heavy in my lap, the afternoon sun baking Juniper Hollow Road until the asphalt shimmered like a mirage. Crestwood, New Mexico felt smaller than ever, its quiet streets mocking the storm inside me. I'm Loretta May Hensley, 58 years old, and I've faced my share of hard days, burying my husband, raising 2 kids on tips and grit, smiling through shifts that left my feet screaming. But getting fired for giving a hungry man a plate of biscuits? That cut deeper than I expected. I kept seeing that old veteran's face, those pale blue eyes carrying a lifetime of weight, and I wondered if he was out there somewhere, feeling as lost as I did. Inside the diner, the lunch crowd was trickling in, their voices a faint hum through the glass. I could see Darlene Faye Whitaker, my former boss, strutting behind the counter like a queen in her kingdom. Her blonde ponytail swung with every sharp gesture, her eyes darting to catch any mistake. Poor Marissa, the new waitress, barely 20 and nervous as a cat, fumbled a tray of plates under Darlene's glare. I wanted to march in there, take the tray from her hands, and show her how it's done. 10 years at Daisy's taught me how to handle a rush, how to charm a grumpy regular, how to make a diner feel like home. But that was gone now, snatched away over a $10 meal I'd given to a man who deserved better. I was about to stand, to walk home and figure out how to stretch my savings until I found another job, when a dusty pickup truck roared into the lot, kicking up gravel like it was angry. Out stepped Travis Lee Colton, a regular at Daisy's, all muscle and flannel, with a crew cut that said he'd never quite left his high school football days behind. Travis worked at the auto shop on Sagebrush Avenue, always tipped well, and called me Miss Loretta, with a grin that could melt ice. Today, though, his jaw was tight, his steps heavy with purpose. He spotted me on the bench and stopped dead, his brows knitting together. "Miss Loretta?" he said, his voice rough with surprise. "What in the world are you doing out here? You're supposed to be inside, running that place like you always do." I forced a smile, though it felt like lifting a boulder. Not anymore, Travis. Darlene fired me this morning. His eyes widened, then narrowed, like he was sizing up a fight. Fired you? For what? I sighed, my fingers tightening around my purse strap. For giving a plate of food to an old man who couldn't pay. Looked like a veteran, down on his luck. Darlene called it stealing. Travis's face darkened, his hands balling into fists. Stealing? That's nonsense. You're the heart of this diner, Miss Loretta. Feeding a hungry man ain't a crime. It's what makes this town worth living in. His words warmed me, like a sip of coffee on a cold morning, but I shrugged, trying to keep the hurt from spilling over. It's done now. I'll find something else. Always do. Travis shook his head, his boots scuffing the gravel. No, ma'am, this ain't right and it ain't over. He glanced at the diner, his eyes blazing. I'm gonna have a word with her. Travis, don't! I started, but he was already marching toward the door, the bell jangling as he stormed inside. I sank back onto the bench, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to follow, to stop him from making a scene, but another part, the part that was tired of swallowing injustice, wanted to see what would happen. Through the window, I watched Travis plant himself at the counter, his broad shoulders squared like he was ready for battle. Inside, the diner was a different world. The lunch crowd was thin, only a handful of booths filled, the jukebox playing a soft Merle Haggard tune. Marissa hovered near the coffee machine, her hands trembling as she poured a refill for a customer. Travis leaned forward, his voice loud enough to carry but steady, like he was holding back a flood. Darlene, you fired Loretta for feeding a hungry veteran? That's how you run this place? Shaming good people and kicking out folks who served our country? Darlene spun around, her ponytail whipping like a snake's tail. This is my business, Travis, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I don't need you telling me how to run it. She gave away my food, my money. That's stealing, plain and simple. Stealing? Travis's laugh was bitter, echoing through the diner. She was doing what you should have done, showing some respect. That man could have been my granddad or yours, and you humiliated her in front of everybody for it. Marissa flinched, nearly dropping the coffee pot. The customers turned, their forks pausing mid-bite. At a corner table, Jolene Ray Baxter, who ran the hair salon on Mesquite Drive, set down her iced tea and leaned forward. Jolene was a force in Crestwood, her salon a hub for gossip and truth. Travis is right, Darlene, she said, her voice calm but firm. Loretta's been nothing but kind to this town. You went too far. Darlene's face flushed crimson, her arms crossing tight. You want to eat here, Jolene? You keep your opinions to yourself. And you, she jabbed a finger at Travis, either order something or get out. Travis didn't budge, his eyes locked on hers. I ain't eating here till you make this right. And I'm betting I'm not the only one. He turned to the room, his voice ringing out. Anybody else think firing Loretta was a mistake? The diner buzzed, like a hive coming to life. Jolene stood, her purse slung over her shoulder, her earrings catching the light. I'm with Travis, she said. I'm not spending another dime here till Loretta's back. Dwayne Perry Holt, a grizzled trucker with a face like worn leather, tossed a few bills on his table. Same here, he grunted, his boots heavy as he headed for the door. Darlene's face paled, but her voice stayed sharp, like a blade she didn't know how to sheathe. Fine, walk out. I don't need any of you. This is my diner, and I say who works here. Outside, I watched through the window, my heart pounding like it wanted to break free. I hadn't expected this. Travis standing up for me, Jolene and Dwayne taking a stand. It felt like a spark catching in dry grass, but Darlene's glare told me she'd sooner burn the place down than back off. I knew her type. Stubborn, prideful, always needing to be right. I'd seen it in her over the years, the way she'd snap at Marissa for a spilled glass or haggle over a dime's worth of change. But this was personal. And it stung. The door opened behind me, and Travis stepped out, followed by Jolene and Dwayne. The air felt lighter out here, but their faces were heavy with resolve. Miss Loretta, Travis said, his voice softer now. We tried. She's stubborn as a mule. But we ain't giving up. Jolene nodded, her lips pursed. Word spreading, Loretta. Crestwood don't take kindly to this kind of thing. We'll get you back in there. Or at least make her regret it. I managed a weak smile, though my chest ached. I appreciate it, y'all, but I don't want folks fighting over me. I'll figure this out. Dwayne lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the air. Ain't just about you, ma'am, he said. It's about that old man, too. Kicking out a vet like that? That's a disgrace to this town. Their words lit something in me. A flicker of defiance I hadn't felt since I was young and scrappy, fighting to keep my kids fed. I thought of the veteran. His quiet pride. That crumpled $10 bill he'd laid on the table like it was all he had left. Where was he now? Was he hungry, alone, carrying the weight of Darlene's scorn? I didn't know his name, but I couldn't shake him from my mind. Travis lingered as Jolene and Dwayne headed to their cars. You need a ride home, Miss Loretta? He asked, tipping his cap. I shook my head, the breeze cool against my skin. I'll walk. Clears my head. But thank you, Travis. What you did in there, it means more than you know. He grinned, but his eyes were serious. Ain't over yet. You'll see. I watched him drive off, his truck's taillights fading down Juniper Hollow Road. My legs carried me toward home, past the old gas station and the hardware store, their signs weathered but proud. Crestwood was small, the kind of place where news traveled faster than a jackrabbit. By now, everyone knew about my firing, about the veteran, about Darlene's outburst. I wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. Halfway home, I passed the community center on Ocotillo Street, a squat brick building where the VFW held their meetings. A group of men stood outside, their laughter mingling with cigarette smoke. One of them, Harlan Wade Tuttle, waved me over. Harlan was a Vietnam vet, wiry and weathered, with a gruff humor that hit a heart bigger than most. I'd known him for years, pouring his coffee at Daisy's, listening to his stories about Saigon and the jungles. Loretta, he called, his voice rough as sandpaper. Heard what happened to Daisy's. That true? Darlene fired you for feeding one of ours? I nodded, too tired to sugarcoat it. Yeah, an old fella. Looked like he'd seen better days. I gave him a plate, and Darlene lost her mind. Harlan's eyes narrowed, his cigarette glowing as he took a drag. Was he wearing a denim jacket? Short gray hair, carried a backpack? My pulse quickened. You know him? Might, Harlan said, exhaling smoke that curled like a ghost in the air. Sounds like Vernon Pritchard. Served in Korea, got a Purple Heart. Keeps to himself, moves around a lot. If it's him, Darlene picked the wrong fight. A Purple Heart? My breath caught. I hadn't known, but it made sense, the way he carried himself, like he'd faced worse than Darlene's wrath and come out standing. He didn't say much, I admitted. Just tried to pay what he could. Harlan stubbed out his cigarette, his boots grinding it into the pavement. That's Vernon, proud as they come. Listen, Loretta, you did right by him. We take care of our own around here. You need anything, you let me know. Thanks, Harlan, I said, my voice catching. I just hope he's okay. He's tougher than he looks, Harlan said, a glint in his eye. But this ain't over. Not by a long shot. I walked home, the weight of the day pressing harder with every step. My house on Tumbleweed Lane was small, but mine, filled with photos of my kids, now grown, and the quilt my mother made before she passed. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea going cold in my hands, as my phone buzzed with texts. Jolene had posted about the incident on the town's Facebook group, and the comments were pouring in. Outrage, support, calls to boycott Daisy's. My heart swelled, but fear crept in too. Darlene wasn't one to back down, and she had a way of twisting things to make herself the victim. I thought of Vernon, out there in some motel or on the road, carrying his backpack and his pride. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But Crestwood was stirring, and I could feel it in my bones. Something was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. To think what happened next. Nobody saw it coming. But it's what changed everything. You won't want to miss this. Morning broke over Crestwood, New Mexico, like a promise kept, the sun rising slow and steady, casting a warm glow across Juniper Hollow Road. I'm Loretta Mae Hensley, 58 years old, and I woke that day with a knot in my chest, the kind that comes when you know the world's watching you, waiting for your next move. Yesterday, I'd lost my job at Daisy's Diner for giving a plate of food to a hungry veteran, a man whose quiet dignity stayed with me like a shadow. By now, the town was buzzing. Jolene Ray Baxter's post on the Crestwood Facebook group had lit a fire, and folks were choosing sides. Daisy's parking lot, usually packed by breakfast, had only a handful of cars, their chrome glinting in the light. I could feel the tide turning, but I wasn't sure what it meant for me. I sat at my kitchen table on Tumbleweed Lane, my coffee cooling in a chipped mug that had been my husband's favorite. My phone buzzed with messages, neighbors offering support, old customers promising not to eat at Daisy's until I was back. It warmed me, sure, but it also felt heavy, like a debt I hadn't asked for. I didn't want to be the center of a storm, didn't want people fighting over me. All I'd done was give a man a meal, a man whose weathered hands and pale blue eyes told me he'd seen more of life's rough edges than most. I couldn't shake the thought of him, out there somewhere, carrying his backpack and his pride. Around 10, I decided to clear my head at the community center on Ocotillo Street, where the VFW was holding its monthly pancake breakfast. I wasn't a veteran, but Harlan Wade Tuttle, a grizzled Vietnam vet with a heart bigger than his bark, had invited me. "You earned a seat at our table," he'd said, and I wasn't about to argue with Harlan. As I walked through Crestwood, the air smelled of sagebrush and dust, and the town felt alive, its pulse quickening with whispers of yesterday's fight. I passed the hardware store, its windows plastered with flyers for the county fair, and the gas station where old men swapped stories over coffee. Crestwood was small, but it had a way of holding on to its people, for better or worse. The community center was a squat brick building, its parking lot crowded with pickups and sedans, their bumpers sporting faded veteran stickers. Inside, the hall was a warm chaos of laughter, clinking plates, and the sweet smell of maple syrup. Veterans of all ages filled the space, some in ball caps with unit patches, others in jackets like the one the old man wore. I spotted Harlan at a table near the back, pouring coffee for a group of men, his wiry frame moving with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime on his feet. He waved me over, his grin cutting through the morning haze. "Morning, Loretta," he said, pulling out a chair. "You're the talk of the town, you know that? Crestwood's got your back." I blushed, sliding into the seat, my purse tucked under the table. "Wish it didn't have to come to this, Harlan. I just want to move on." He shook his head, his eyes sharp despite the lines etched around them. "Ain't that simple. You stood up for one of us. That's not something we forget." He gestured to the men at the table. "This here's Roy Glenn Carver, served in Nam with me, and that's Everett Dale Monroe, Desert Storm. They heard about Vernon." My heart skipped at the name. "Vernon? That's the man from the diner?" Roy, a stocky man with a gray beard and a voice like gravel, leaned forward. "Saw him last night at the motel on Route 12. Keeps to himself, but he mentioned you. Said he felt bad about what happened." Everett, quieter, with a face that held a soldier's calm, nodded. "Vernon's a good man. Korea was hard on him. Lost a lot over there. Doesn't talk much, but you can see it in him." I swallowed, picturing Vernon's trembling hands, the way he'd tried to pay with that crumpled $10 bill. "I didn't know who he was," I said, my voice soft. "Just saw a man who needed a meal." Harlan clapped my shoulder, his grip firm. "That's why you're here, Loretta. You saw him, not just his empty wallet. That's rare." Before I could respond, the hall's double doors swung open and a hush fell over the room, like the air itself held its breath. 4 men in crisp Marine Corps dress blues stepped inside, their polished shoes clicking on the linoleum, their presence filling the space like a storm rolling in. The tallest, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a shaved head and a chest heavy with ribbons, scanned the room with eyes that missed nothing. His name tag read, Sergeant Major Kendrick Otis Vance. Behind him stood 3 younger Marines, their faces stern but steady, like they'd seen battle and come out stronger. Harlan stood, his cigarette forgotten in the ashtray. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "That's Kendrick Vance. Ran drills at Pendleton back in the day. What's he doing here?" The room parted as Kendrick approached our table, his steps measured, his gaze locking onto me like a beacon. "You Loretta Hensley?" he asked, his voice deep and steady, the kind that could command a room or calm a crisis. I nodded, my throat dry as desert sand. "Yes, sir." He extended a hand, his grip firm but not crushing. "Heard what you did for Vernon Pritchard. I'm here to thank you." I shook his hand, my mind racing, trying to keep up. "Just did what anyone would," I said, though the words felt small under his stare. "Not anyone," Kendrick said, his tone unyielding but warm, like a fire you could trust not to burn you. "Vernon was my first sergeant in Iraq. Saved my life more than once. Man's a hero, even if he doesn't wear it on his sleeve. When I heard what went down at that diner, I drove straight from El Paso." The room was silent now, every eye on us. I felt their weight, but Kendrick's words anchored me. Vernon? A hero? I'd sensed something in him. But this was more. "I didn't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just couldn't let him go hungry." Kendrick's jaw tightened, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "And you got fired for it. That's not right." He turned to his men, his voice sharp. "Let's move out. We've got business to settle." Before I could ask what he meant, he and his Marines strode out, their boots echoing like a drumbeat. Whispers erupted around us, the veterans exchanging glances, some nodding, others grinning. Harlan let out a low whistle. "If Kendrick's involved, Darlene's in for a reckoning." My stomach churned. "What's he planning?" Harlan's grin was all teeth. "You'll see. Come on, let's go." I didn't want to go, didn't want to face Darlene again, but something in Harlan's voice pulled me along. We piled into his old Ford, Roy and Everett in the back, the engine coughing to life. As we drove to Daisy's, my heart pounded, a mix of dread and defiance. Crestwood streets passed in a blur, the barber shop, the library, the old oak on Mesquite Drive where kids carved their initials. I wondered what Vernon was doing, if he knew the town was rallying. We pulled into Daisy's lot, the black SUV with tinted windows already parked, its presence like a warning. Inside, the diner was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Darlene stood behind the counter, her arms crossed, her face red as a summer sunset. Kendrick and his Marines faced her, their dress blues stark against the diner's worn charm. A few customers, Jolene, Travis Lee Colton, and a couple of regulars, watched from their booths, their forks still. Kendrick's voice carried, calm but unyielding. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Major Kendrick Vance, United States Marine Corps. I understand you fired Miss Hensley for giving a meal to Vernon Pritchard, a decorated veteran." Darlene's eyes flashed, but she held her ground, her ponytail swinging. "This is my business, Sergeant. I don't answer to you." She broke my rules, gave away food I paid for. Kendrick didn't flinch, his presence like a mountain. "Your rules. Let me tell you about Vernon Pritchard. He earned a Purple Heart in Korea, took shrapnel to save his squad. He's lived a life serving this country, and you humiliated him over a plate of biscuits." Darlene opened her mouth, then closed it, her confidence faltering. Jolene leaned forward, her eyes blazing, and Travis cracked his knuckles, his glare fixed on Darlene. I stood near the door with Harlan, Roy, and Everett, my heart in my throat. The diner felt smaller, the walls closing in as the truth hung heavy. Kendrick continued, his voice a quiet thunder. "Miss Hensley showed him the respect you didn't. From what I hear, she's the reason this place has any soul." You owe her an apology and her job back." Darlene laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that grated against the silence. "You don't get to tell me how to run my diner. Get out, all of you." The room tensed, like a rope pulled taut. Then, from the back, a figure stepped forward, his denim jacket clean, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Vernon Pritchard, his pale blue eyes locked onto Darna Yao System. Darlene, his face steady as stone. The diner seemed to hold its breath, every eye on him. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "But Miss Loretta treated me like a man, not a burden. You could learn a thing or two from her." Darlene's face reddened, her lips parting as if to snap back. But the door jangled, and a new figure stepped in. Marla Jeanette Dorsey, editor of the Crestwood Gazette, her blazer sharp and her phone already recording. I'd seen her at the pancake breakfast, her eyes bright with the scent of a story. "Darlene," she said, her voice crisp as autumn air, "I'm running a piece tomorrow about what happened here. Folks deserve to know how you treated a veteran and the woman who stood up for him. Unless you want to explain yourself to all of Crestwood, I'd rethink your position." Darlene's bravado crumbled, her shoulders slumping as the weight of the room pressed down. The customers' stares were no longer curious but judgmental, Travis's fists still clenched, Jolene's gaze unyielding. For the first time, Darlene looked small, her kingdom shrinking around her. "Fine," she muttered, her voice barely audible, like a flag lowered in defeat. "Loretta, you can have your job back. And you," she pointed at Vernon, "your meals are free from now on." I stood by the door, my heart pounding. But not with fear, with something fiercer. Something alive. I shook my head, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I don't want to work for someone who needs a crowd to do the right thing. I'm done here, Darlene, but I hope you'll treat folks like Vernon with the respect they've earned." Vernon's eyes met mine, a nod passing between us, silent but heavy with meaning. "You're a good woman, Miss Hensley," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Stay that way." I smiled, though my chest ached with the weight of it all. "You too, Vernon. Stay safe." He turned and walked out, the door swinging shut with a soft jangle. The diner fell quiet, the customers returning to their meals, but the air had shifted, like the town itself had taken a breath. Darlene slumped behind the counter, her authority a shadow of what it was. I turned to leave, Harlan, Roy, and Everett at my side, their presence a quiet strength. Outside, the sun was high, Crestwood alive with possibility. I'd lost my job, but I'd gained something more, a reminder that kindness could spark a fire, that standing up for what's right could move a town. As I walked down Juniper Hollow Road, I felt Vernon's gratitude in my bones, a warmth that carried me home. To think what happened here. Nobody saw it coming. But it's what changed everything. You won't believe how it all turned out.